Testing, testing, testing. All right, everybody, welcome back to Sports Betting Truth Live. This is going to be awesome. This video, I haven't really talked about it that much, but I've talked about it. I worked all weekend on my new college basketball model, and just to let you know, don't think that this video is only about college basketball. There's a reason the title of this stream is Basketball Discussion, because the concepts that I'm about to talk about can easily translate to NBA. The only thing you might want to change in an NBA model compared to college basketball is how you calculate possessions, and the only way you do that is change what the constant is. The constant in college basketball, I use 0.475, but people in the NBA have used 0.4, 0.44. So other than that, everything else is pretty much the same. Oh yeah, and also tempo. It's instead I calculate tempo in college basketball as possessions divided by 40 minutes. In NBA, obviously, it would be possessions divided by 48 minutes. But this video is going to be pretty high level. It's going to be very, very analytical, so to speak. So if that's not your cup of tea, you might want to stick around because it still might be interesting. Otherwise, that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to be talking about my college basketball model that I spent hours working on this weekend. I made it pretty far though. I literally started from scratch on either Wednesday or Thursday, and I've made it pretty far. I have all my team stat and individual stat adjustments done, and so now I'm working on the Monte Carlo. So that's going to be the bulk of what this video is going to be about, because I've really just been brainstorming the Monte Carlo at this point. I've done a Monte Carlo basketball model before, but it was the NBA 2016-2017, and it was very elementary in terms of how a Monte Carlo model might work. It wasn't, it was a good Monte Carlo model, but it was, I don't know if sloppy is the right word, but it was very elementary. It was a very, for a Monte Carlo simulation, very simple. And so it did well for, just like my college basketball models, it did well for like a month and a half, and then it just crashed and burned. And I think that's the ultimate fault of the way I had that set up. So I've literally done this from scratch. I went back to the drawing board this weekend and just totally built it from the ground up. And what I have is impressive so far, but now the real challenge confirms. How do you take all these stats that I have and plug it into a Monte Carlo simulation? Well, that's what I was trying to work out today. Pretty crazy stuff. I mean, just a lot of brain. I probably spent 5 hours just brainstorming how a Monte Carlo model might work. And so I'll show that to you. All right. So let me show you, like I said, I need a producer, so bear with me. So this is just a screenshot of my R scripts from my college basketball model. I don't know if you can see it that well. Let me zoom in on it. But yeah, I'm running last year's numbers, just so I can have like a full data set to program the model for. So this is last year. So I have every team and every player with fully adjusted season-long efficiency stats. So you got your offensive efficiency, effective field goal percentage. SR2 is pretty much shot rate, 2-point shot rate. SM2 is 2-point field goal percentage. So like these are all adjusted and everything. Free throw rate, one of the 4 factors. Offensive rebound percentage, defense, total rebound percentage, assist, steal, block, turnover, foul percentage. And then the opposites for defense. Those are the team stats, but this is just a screenshot of the R script because I don't have the script loaded on this laptop. It's on my desktop computer where I do all the work on, but you kind of get the idea. So now I'm going to transition into the bulk of what this video is about. And that is brainstorming the Monte Carlo run. So let me open up this Excel file. I'm working it out. So this is what you want to do. Before you actually go in and program it, you got to work it out. You got to do like a demonstration. I do it in Excel just because it's easy. You work it out, you play it out, you brainstorm, because you're going to catch a lot of things along the way that had you programmed it and started from programming first, you're like, oh crap, now I have to go all the way back up and undo all my programming. So you want to work it out first, make sure you have all the kinks worked out, all of that before you start programming. So that's what I'm doing here. Gosh. So yeah, my monitor upstairs is bigger, so I don't know if I'll be able to fit all the information on one screen here. I apologize, guys. Maybe I like... You know what, that'll work. I can always scroll over. All right, so I'm going to... Okay, so I know this looks like a lot, but I'll walk through it line by line. So this is my Monte Carlo brainstorming for Villanova versus Seton Hall, a hypothetical matchup between these two teams using last year's stats, right? So the thing is that the reason I picked this game is because it was one of the last games played of the season, and therefore, hopefully, whatever end result I have should hopefully mirror what the actual result in the game was, which, by the way, Villanova won 79-77. But I'll walk through this line by line. So everything here, this says season-adjusted stats, right? Maybe I should zoom in a little bit more. I can always scroll over if I need to. So season-adjusted stats. This is both teams' adjusted stats for the season. So Villanova's offensive efficiency adjusted, by the way, which means it takes strength of schedule into account and all that. It's 1.13, Seton Hall 1.11, and obviously the diametrical opposite to those stats is defensive efficiency, which Villanova is 0.92, Seton Hall is 0.922. So pretty much very similar teams in terms of efficiencies here. These are very evenly matched team, and that's why the final score is only a 2-point margin. But in case you're wondering what offensive efficiency is, you know, these are what we would call tempo-adjusted stats. And you use tempo-adjusted stats in basketball because I'll use a great example. A great example would be Virginia. Everybody knows Virginia basketball, right? They play at a molasses slow pace, so everyone thinks that because their scores are so low that their offenses must suck, right? Well, that's actually wrong. They might play at a slow pace, but that doesn't mean their offense sucks. It just means they have fewer possessions in a game. So what's more impressive? Scoring 80 points in 100 possessions or scoring 60 points in 50 possessions, right? Yeah, the team that scored 80 points might have scored more points overall, but it took them twice as many possessions to get there as Virginia. So that's why I use tempo-adjusted stats. So every stat you want to use in a college basketball model should be tempo-adjusted. You divide all the stats by the number of possessions in a game, so that way you can get a per-possession statistic. So that's what offensive efficiency measures, points per possession. So Villanova, 1.13 points per possession. Very important. If you just use points per game, you're not factoring in tempo. So you're going to think that a team like Virginia sucks, or a team that plays really fast but is no good. Like the team with the fastest pace last year is Mississippi Valley State, and they were the worst team in the country as well. So just because you play fast does not mean you're any good. So anyway, that's just kind of what that is. But as far as that, here's all the season-adjusted stats. And a Monte Carlo model is not going to use all these stats, but I calculate them anyway, you know, because it's part of it's just fun, and also just because you want to at least have the 4 factors in there in case you ever want to do like a macro regression. But that's what the season-adjusted stats are right here. And so I'll tell you which stats you use in a Monte Carlo going down. And then we have Villanova, Seton Hall, and then we have the national average. And national average is very important because without a national average, you don't know how good a team is relative to the average team in the country. And ultimately, that's what an adjusted stat measures. It's not that Villanova scores 1.13 points per possession. What that stat is measuring is how many points per possession would they score against the league average team. The league average team. And, I'm going to borrow KenPom here real quick because I don't have my R script up here. So KenPom does a lot of the same stuff. I mean, there's probably not a lot of difference between what I come up with and what KenPom comes up with. So I'm going to find out who was the league average team last year. 351 teams. So who was team number 175? That was Appalachian State. Appalachian State was our league average team last year. So basically what this stat is measuring right here is how many points Villanova would hypothetically score on a neutral floor against Appalachian State. 1.13 points per possession. Adjusted, right? And you calculate that by using the national averages. So the national average offensive efficiency is right about 1. So Villanova is 12.3 points above average in offensive efficiency, which is what this column is right here. It shows how each team's stat compares to the national average, row 5. Right? So, for example, Villanova makes about 4.5% more of its three-pointers on average than the national average. Villanova rebounds about 2.65% of its shots less than the national average. So the national average is 27.9. Villanova is only 25.2. You need to measure the national average to calculate expectation. And from there, you do the opposite sums. That's what these columns are. Opposite sums. So if you're calculating an opposite sum, you want to add the diametric opposite stat of this right here. So the diametric opposite of offensive efficiency is defensive efficiency of the other team. So the diametric opposite to Villanova's offensive efficiency is Seton Hall's defensive efficiency. So you add those two together and you get an opposite sum, which is 0.038687. Just ignore all the trailing decimals here, Like I said, this was just the work of a brainstorming session today. So you do that for all the stats going down the line. You calculate the opposite sums. And from there, you take the opposite sum and add it onto the national average. So that's what this number is right here. It is the opposite sum, 0.038 whatever, plus 1.00779, which is 1.046787. And if this game was being played on a neutral court, you would stop there. That would be Villanova's expected offensive efficiency against Seton Hall on a neutral floor, 1.046 points per possession. But since this was played on Seton Hall's home floor, we're not done. You have to factor in the home advantages now. And so all these stats I have here in orange, let me scroll down a bit. Why won't you scroll? There we go. So all these stats I have here in orange down here are stats that you factor in home advantage for. So I'm not going to do it for like 2-point shot rate and 3-point shot rate, right? I'm not going to do that because, I feel like that has nothing to do with home advantage, but more how a team wants to play. But anyway, so this is why home advantage is so important in college basketball and why I think this season might be a bit different because of the lack of crowds. But on average, a team's home offensive efficiency is about 4% higher than the baseline one, right? So you would, and the opposite is true for away. So for Villanova, you'd multiply this number, 1.04, times the away disadvantage number, which is 0.96122, because on average, a team's offensive efficiency on the road is about 96% of what it would be on a neutral floor. And so 0.96 times 1.04, which means their expected offensive efficiency at Seton Hall would be 1.00589 when you factor in the home advantage. So right in line with the national average. Seton Hall, on the other hand, even though their neutral floor efficiency is 1.029, they get the 1.04% bonus. So multiplied times 1.04%, their offensive efficiency moves up to 1.071. So, and obviously the opposite of that would be the defensive efficiency, right? So Villanova's defensive efficiency would be 1.07. Seton Hall's would be a 1 because it's the diametric opposite of those. And so you do that for all these stats that I adjust for home advantage, like 2-point field goal percentage, 3-point field goal percentage, offensive rebounding percentage, all of that. Turnover percentage, very big one. We'll see that in a second. But that's how you get the expectations. Expectations is what you need to run a Monte Carlo, or not even a Monte Carlo. You could use these expectations to come up with a simple guesstimate. So see, I did the same thing for tempo. It's hidden over here, but you do the same thing for tempo too. Like Villanova's possessions per 40 minutes on the season, 66.77. Seton Hall's 69.87. Right? So Seton Hall barely above the national average, Villanova a little bit below. So naturally, the game tempo is going to be 67.58 possessions. And so we have all these final expectations right here, right? And I don't need to put the defensive ones because basically the opposite of the offense is what the team's defense is going to be and vice versa. So that's how you calculate expectation. Now you could do a very simple calculation right here. You could do a very simple calculation. So basically a team's offensive efficiency equals D36 times the tempo, T36. So Villanova would be expected to score about 67.98 points, and Seton Hall would be T37 times D37. Whoops, I forgot the equal sign. 72.4. So a spread of about 4.5. I forgot what the spread for this game was, but obviously Villanova beat it because they won outright. But that would be the simplest way to use these calculations to calculate a projected final score. You could stop right there. That would be a pretty good way to use to calculate how a game would turn out. There might not be any need to go further, but that's the thing. I am. And the main reason I want to go further is because I want to calculate individual stats as well, because I want to use this stuff for daily fantasy college basketball. And so to do that, you got to go a little bit farther. So that's why you'd want to run a Monte Carlo simulation for these games. And now we have the Monte Carlo tree. And this is going to get kind of confusing, but again, I'll walk you through it. The Monte Carlo tree. Yep. This big bad boy right here is the Monte Carlo. I'm going to zoom in on this as much as I can so you can see it. All right, so here's the Monte Carlo tree. Now, in a basketball game, a possession ends in one of three ways. It ends in a field goal attempt that is either made or rebounded by the defense. It ends in a turnover, or it ends in a free throw that is either made with no chance for a rebound, meaning the possession changes, or rebounded by the defense, right? A missed and rebounded by the defense, like the front end of a one-on-one or missing the second free throw. So those are the 5 ways a possession can end, right? So in order to calculate the probabilities of the 67.59 expected possessions in the game to end, how they're going to end, you got to do some work. And this is, I had to brainstorm. I figured this all out myself, right? So the easiest way to start is turnovers, right? Because turnover percentage, you don't need to do anything funky with that. Villanova's expected turnover percentage is 16.1, Seton Hall 14.8. Don't need to manipulate that at all. You can plug that in right here. So if we expect 16% of Villanova's possessions to end in a turnover, you just do 16% times 67.59. You get this number right here, 10.9, right? So we expect about 10.9 Villanova offensive possessions to end in a turnover. Stay with me. That's the easiest part of this Monte Carlo tree, right? Stay with me. So then we have foul percentage. And I come up with this because this is the percentage of possessions that result in a foul. And this number is a little bit unique from all the other percentage stats because it's actually calculated by the number of fouls in a game divided by possessions times 2, because fouls do not only occur on offensive possessions, they can occur on defense, or they can occur on both defensive and offensive possessions. So you want to use the total number of possessions for both teams in the game to calculate that number. So Villanova's and Seton Hall's expected foul percentage very similar, right? And I have another stat I calculate: free throws per foul. So how many free throws did a team shoot per foul drawn? Villanova shoots about 0.86, Seton Hall about 0.99. For every foul they draw, that's how many free throws they shoot on average. Important to know. And so we can calculate the estimated number of fouls for each team by multiplying the foul percentage times the number of possessions times 2. Remember, because they can happen on both ends of the floor. So 11% times the sum of this, so 11% times 135.18 equals about 15.78 expected fouls for Villanova and 15.94 expected fouls for Seton Hall. Then we move on to free throw per possession. I don't know if I use this in anything else, but I have it here anyway just because I wanted to have it. So this is an estimate of how many free throws per possession. It's simply multiplying that. It's simply multiplying the free throws per foul times the foul percentage, and then field goal attempts per possession. This is important. Oops. And I calculate that I-42 divided by J-36. Got to go back up here. So, okay. I calculate the field goal attempts per possession by this. The free throw per possession times the free throw rate. So free throw rate is one of the 4 factors. The 4 factors are considered the four most important stats in a basketball game. Free throw rate is simply the free throw attempts divided by the field goal attempts. That's it. So if you shoot 10 free throws and shoot the ball 40 times, your free throw rate is going to be 25%. You can use the free throw rate to calculate the field goal attempts per possession. If you know the number of free throws per possession, right, and you know the number of possessions, you can calculate the field goal attempts that way too. So then we have estimated free throws, which is simply the estimated fouls times the free throws per foul. Nothing fancy there. Estimated field goals attempts. You use the free throw rate and divide the estimated number of free throws divided by the free throw rate to get 54 estimated free field goal attempts, and so on. So I actually want to move down here because I think it'll be easier to do this flow chart right here. So, how did I calculate Villanova using 74.24% of its possessions on a field goal attempt? Well, here's how I did it. T36, which is tempo, minus the sum of these two stats right here, turnovers and free throws. So actually, I calculate the field goal attempts last. I actually calculate free throws first. And that is, basketball possessions are calculated, the number of free throws per possession in college basketball is free throw attempts times 0.475. So that's all I did. I did the estimated number of free throws, which in Villanova's case, 13.7, and I multiplied that times 0.475, as you can see here. So now that we know the value of a free throw in terms of per possessions and turnovers, we can take the estimated tempo and subtract this from it, and we get the estimated number of possessions where a field goal attempt used up the possession. Now you're probably wondering, why does this number not equal the field goal attempts for the game? Well, offensive rebounds. So now we can start doing the flow chart. So field goal attempt flow chart goes over here, follow the yellow bar. So here's what you do. In a Monte Carlo run, here's what you do for the field goal attempt possession use. Okay, so you roll the dice 100 times. 74% of the time you're going to use a possession on a field goal attempt, right? So when that 74% happens, here's the flow chart. We can expect Villanova to make 46% of its twos and miss 54%. Where'd I get that number? Well, right here. Shot make two, basically 2-point field goal percentage for Villanova is expected to be 46.1, 46.2. And obviously the miss is going to be the opposite of that. And from there, you can calculate what percentage of the misses was an offensive rebound and a defensive rebound. Well, how do you do that? Well, you multiply 53.8% times Seton Hall's expected offense, or times Villanova's offensive rebound and percentage expectation, 23.998%, and you get 12.9%. Now, in a Monte Carlo simulation, the reason I have this little thing right here is that if you're doing a Monte Carlo run, the possession does not end until the shot is either made or it's rebounded by the defense, right? That's when a possession ends. And this number, and this number needs to equal 100%, which it does, which is why I have the sum just as a check. So in a Monte Carlo run, if you're trying to simulate a possession, you cannot end the possession until, like I said, the shot is made or a shot is missed and rebounded by the defense. So you will keep looping around if an offensive rebound occurs until you get one of those two things. You loop. So in a normal field goal attempt possession, 46.2% of the time, shot will be made. 12.9% of the time, the shot will be missed but rebounded by the offense, which gives them another chance. It does not use up the possession. And then 41% of the time, it'll be missed and rebounded by the defense. Three-pointers, same thing. 35% of the time made. I got the number from right here. 65% of the time missed. 15.6% of the time rebounded by the offense. 49% of the time rebounded by the defense. You keep cycling around until either made or rebounded by the defense. Same for Seton Hall. So that's how you would do a Monte Carlo simulation for something like that. And then I have this over here, in case you're tracking stats, which I am because I want to do DFS. But if you're tracking stats, here's how you can determine if an assist or a block occurred on the possession. The make X is a stat that I calculate by multiplying the 2-point percentage times the shot rate plus the 3-point percentage times the shot rate. So make X. It's basically the combination of possessions that end in a made 2-point or 3-point shot. That's basically what make X stands for. And if Villanova's assist percentage is 17.23, but remember, assist percentage is for all possessions, not just possessions where a shot was made. All offensive possessions. So if 34.7% of Villanova's offensive possessions result in a made shot, then you divide that number by 17.23 to get the actual assist percentage, is what I call it. So the actual assist percentage is the percentage of possessions and percentage of possessions with a made shot that end in an assist. So about 50% of the time. Same thing with the blocks. So the miss X is basically what percentage of possessions end in a missed shot. Well, 50%. You divide that by Seton Hall's expected block percentage, which is about 8.5%, and therefore you can expect about 17% of Villanova's missed shots to be the result of a block. Right? I hope everyone's following me here. Like, I worked this all out, but I'm trying to explain it as best as I can. So that's pretty much how you can utilize the field goal attempt part of the Monte Carlo run to calculate individual stats. Same with turnovers. So every steal is a turnover, but not every turnover is a steal, right? So you want to calculate what percentage of every turnover was a steal. That's pretty easy. You simply multiply the turnover percentage times the other team's steal percentage. Not hard. So if Villanova is expected to turn the ball over 16% of the time, and Seton Hall is expected to steal it 8% of the time, there you go. 8% divided by 16%, you get about 51.6% of every turnover Seton Hall forces will be a steal. That's important for DFS reasons because steal is one of the metrics. Free throws. So here you go. Say a possession is used by a free throw. Well, 1 divided by 0.475 is about 2.11 free throws. So if Villanova's expected free throw percentage is 72.61, Seton Hall's free throw percentage is 73.45. Multiply it by 2.11, you have about 1.55 expected points every time a free throw happens. Pretty easy, right? And then this is calculated independently. Foul percentage. You can rack that up independently. Every time a possession occurs, did a foul occur? Maybe. But that's how you do a team-based Monte Carlo run. And I say team-based because all of this would be calculated using the team's stats, not the individual stats. And if a team is pretty consistent on the season, they don't have any injuries or transfers or anything like that, and plays a consistent roster every game, that would be a very good way to do it. You wouldn't really need to get down to the nitty-gritty, but you could, right? And so here's what you could do. There's 2 ways you can do a individual-based Monte Carlo run. The assignment method or I don't even know what I would call it. The same method I would use in so in baseball, my Monte Carlo baseball runs, I basically run it based on the starting pitchers in the lineup. So it's very dynamic. It's not based on the team averages, but more so the averages and statistics of the players in the lineup and the starting pitcher. So in basketball, you can either do it by assignment or you can do like a Monte Carlo run based off of a projected floor. And by that, I will move on. So here is this. Let me scroll up and zoom in. So let me see if I can fit this all on one page. Kind of. Anyway, so here I have the rosters for both teams and every team's team season adjusted stats, right? And so these stats try to measure the same thing as the team stats do. What was the team's, for example, what would Colin Gillespie's stats be against Appalachian State on a per possession basis, right? But there's some stats on here that weren't included in the team stat, like percentage of minutes. So like the percentage of minutes played in games they played. Same, the average number of possessions played in games that they played, anything else. Offensive rating, which by the way is incorrect. I have a bug that calculates this right now, so it's not accurate. This column's not, but defensive rating is. Usage, percentage of possessions used when they in the game. Points production, so basically how many points produced per game. The team games, how many games the team played, and the minutes, how many minutes they played per team game. So that kind of like is percentage of minutes played divided by the number of games they actually played in. All right, so I have that for both teams. So from there, there's it gets kind of complicated from here because I didn't really know what direction to go. So at first I was like, how about I just adjust all the individual stats like I did in the last page, right? And so I came up with the expectations, which is, their stats times the opponent adjustments, and then I added home advantage. And so I had expectation right here, right? So against Seton Hall, we could expect Colin Gillespie to have an effective field goal percentage of 57.5%. His season effective field goal percentage is a 53 point. I don't know how it was adjusted up, but maybe I have an error. Yep, I don't know why it's adjusted up. I have an error in there somewhere, but this is just a stream of consciousness video, guys. Like I said, I was working on this all day. Not all day, but all weekend, and just trying to, like, plot this thing out. Because I'm not done. I'm still in the middle of this. I was not done with this before I went live on this broadcast. So, here's the thing. What do you do from there? What do you do after you've added home advantage and everything else? What do you do, right? Well, one idea I had was to come up with an algorithm to, like, filter out the, walk-ons and guys who probably aren't going to play, and only have players that are probably going to play in the game, and the likelihood of them being in the game, which is what this column is right here, the share. Right? The share is basically calculated the number of minutes divided by the whole team's percentage of minutes, right? That's one way you can do it. And then you can come up with probability shares from there. So say you calculate say your Monte Carlo run says Villanova's going to shoot a 2-point shot. Well, how do you determine which player is going to shoot it? Well, this is the assignment method. You can calculate right here. You do a probability share, so you calculate their share times their stat, so 0.17 times 0.11, and you get this number right here. You sum them all up, and then you divide that number times the sum, and you can say, okay, Colin Gillespie's 21% chance it's Colin Gillespie who takes a 2-point shot if your Monte Carlo simulation says, on this possession, Villanova's going to shoot a 2. Right? Same with this. If they shoot a 3, there's a 23% chance it's going to be Colin Gillespie. That's what you call assignment, right? Assignment means you calculate the probability of something happening using the team stats, and then come over to the individual page to determine who shot it, right? But then there's another way you can do it. What if the Monte Carlo run was all based on individual stats? Team stats had nothing to do with it. You're only using individual stats to make your calculations. Well, here's the problem. Here's the main problem. And that is, in a box score, you mainly only see offensive stats. The only defensive stats you're going to see are steals, blocks, and defensive rebounds. And even then, maybe steals and blocks, not so much defensive rebounds, but defense is more of a team thing. It's not an individual thing. So it's very hard to determine what, especially in a box score, right? Maybe with play-by-play data that shows who's in the game at what time, but that doesn't really exist in college. And if it did, that'd be a pain in the butt to scrape. But it's very hard to determine, for example, what influence Colin Gillespie has on the team's defense. Now, there's a way to kind of approximate it, and that's the defensive rating, which is this column right here. The lower, the better. But the problem is, it looks like the guys who play the most have the highest defensive rating, so who knows how accurate this is right here. You know what? I'm going to check something. Because I know Sports Reference does track defensive rating for college basketball, so let me see if that's the case for Seton Hall or Villanova last year. So, advanced. I'm looking for, okay, so defensive rating. So I'm going to sort it by minutes. So yeah, the higher defensive ratings are the guys who play the most, it looks like. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be. Like I said, it might be miscalculated like the offensive rating was, but just stay with me here. So that's really the only way you can approximate a player's impact on how the overall defense is, right? So actually, this is the season stat defensive rating right here. So yeah, at least for Seton Hall, it looks like the guys who played the most had the worst defensive rating. Let me see if that's the case. If it's not, then I have a miscalculation. And I'll have to fix that in a later time. Seton Hall. So Miles Powell's defensive rating was 99.1. And then that's unadjusted, though. So my adjusted defensive rating was 105. Yeah, that's... I must have a miscalculation somewhere, but just stay with me. It is what it is. Anyway, the problem with doing a method where, say, you like use the average of these players' stats right here to determine a Monte Carlo run, right? The problem with that is that the defensive side. You have offensive stats, but how does an individual player affect the defense? And for that reason, I think the assignment method at least is the way I'm leaning right now. Using the team stats to determine probabilities, and then calculating the probability of which player, for example, shot the 2-point shot or rebounded the ball, right, or turned the ball over. But say so, like the top 5 Seton Hall players in terms of minutes played average a turnover percentage of 2.8%. The team average is 2.97. So hypothetically, if you're doing like a method where you're just using only individual stats, you could say, okay, well, if those 5 players are in the game, then they should expect to turn the ball over a little less than the team would on average, right? Because their turnover percentage is only 2.8% compared to basically 3% for the team. That'd be one way to do it, but I didn't get that far. I did not get, I was working on this and I was like, I'm going to try to get as much of it done before this broadcast, and this is where I left off. As you can see, this is not all the way filled in because this is where I left off. But for example, say you calculated there's going to be an offensive rebound. Well, you can use assignment to determine that Jeremiah Robinson Earl has a 35% chance of grabbing that offensive rebound. But if you take the average right here of the top 5 players, it's 19.2%. The sum is 39%. But you got to remember, this is all calculated on a per possession basis of how many of offensive rebounds they grabbed while they were in the game. So that's why the sum of all this is going to be way higher than the team average of 24%. The sum is 40%, but that's because it's not using the same dividends. But you guys get the idea. How about this? The top 5 guys' average offensive rebounding percentage is 3.8%. That's lower than the sum of 4.4%, right? So maybe you could be like, okay, there might not be, because one of their main offensive rebounders, Demir Cosby Roundtree, is not a part of that, and he helps the average. But from there, you could do like a weighted average, multiply this times the share. Like, there's so many different ways you can go. It's ridiculous. But I think as of right now, the assignment method is where I'm leaning. But the problem with the assignment method and using team stats in general is, say, what if last year Miles Powell got hurt? What if he got hurt? How would Seton Hall's overall team averages be affected? Well, it's probably not that hard to adjust. His offensive rating, very high. But how would you adjust the team stats for his absence, right? And that's the benefit of using a individual approach for your statistics, is that you can account for people that are hurt, players that are inevitably going to miss games because of COVID and all of that. Now, I think it really only matters for bigger name players, but that would be the advantage of using an individual approach. But then the downside of that is you'd actually have to track, okay, who's in, who's out, right? And there's 357 teams or however many, 354. And do you have the time to track the rosters of all 354 teams every day? I don't. So you'd really only have to create like a side database for the big names, the really important players who are going to be, head and shoulders above the replacement level player for a team, and maybe try to adjust the team stats on the back end, accounting for their absence, right? So, like, for example, Miles Powell generates 19.86 points per game for his team. The team average is 7, so that's about 12 points above a replacement level player. Now, is Miles Powell worth 12 points? He probably is. Last year, he probably was, but he was that good of a player. And I would say Seton Hall would miss him greatly. But where am I going with this? But, some other players might step up as well. Like Quincy McKnight's number could go up in his absence, And also, I'm losing my train of thought here, but if Miles Powell produced 19.86 points a game, that's only offense. Like I said, there's really no way to calculate that for defense. So, for example, who has a high defensive rate, really good defensive rating who actually plays? Anthony Nelson, 90, right? Maybe Anthony Nelson, let me look at his numbers. Does he rebound a lot? No, not really. Does he block a lot? No. So he must, I don't know. Does he force a lot of steals? No. So I don't know why his defensive rating is so low, to be honest with you. Like I said, I think it's not calculated right. But say Anthony Nelson is like a big man who just changes a lot of shots. And I'm going to use an example here. TCU basketball 2014. They basically had one guy above 6'5". His name was Kavar Shepard. He was a freshman. We went 0-18 in the Big 12 that year. So what every team did was try to get him in foul trouble and then have to resort to the backup at the 5, which was a guy who was really short. Right? So Kavar Shepard simply being in the game changed how the other team played offense. Right? Even though it didn't show up on the stat sheet, just the mere presence of Kavar Shepard meant, that the team was probably going to have a harder time scoring, especially 2-point shots in the paint. That's not going to show up in a defensive rating or anything. I mean, it might, but that's hard to account for. So it's easy to account for how many offensive points a player will leave on the table if they get hurt, but it's very hard to determine how many defensive points, more or less, the other team could hypothetically score if the player's not playing. Another issue with using the individual-based approach. So at least with the assignment approach, you can use the team stats, that everything's ironed out and everything, especially the team's defensive stats, and go from there. But I think the hybrid approach is probably best. Maintain a database of big name, important, high usage, high offensive rating players that are hurt or not going to play, and try to adjust the team's stats before you do all the expectation calculations and everything. That would be the best way to do it, in my opinion. Instead of trying to, at least that's the way I'm looking at right now. But, like, for example, you can calculate expected points scored per possession right here. So I'm going to do that over here. So equals Miles Powell expected 56.84 possessions, so G128 times H128. Miles Powell expected to score 21.45 points. If I add all that up, you get 80.96. Which was a lot less than the 72.4 we got up here. So I don't know if that's the best way to determine how many points a guy's going to score. Wait, that's not it. This, never mind. This number right here can be equals, what was it, 56.9 or 67.59 equals 67.59 times F128. So Miles Powell expected 54 point whatever possessions in the game. And then there we go. That looks more like it. So that equals 78. Still a little bit too high, but you get the idea. All right. So I'm just brainstorming now. But like I said, I've been working on this all weekend, and I want to have a concrete plan before I actually go in and program the Monte Carlo stuff. I really do. But I put my old college basketball model on hold just so I could focus on this. I'm in no hurry though. Like, the season's new. A lot of teams aren't even going to be playing very many games in December. So maybe have it ready by mid-December is kind of what I'm looking at right now. It's been a lot of fun though. I once I saw that the NCAA still had their HTML stat pages up, I was like, I got to do this. And it's been a lot of work so far, but it's been fun. But that's kind of where I'm left off. So I'll have an update. I wish I had my concept ready for this video, but I didn't, because I didn't want to rush anything. I'm still brainstorming. I'm still working things out. So that's kind of where I am at right now. All right. I'm going to read the chat now. Yeah, I knew... I'm going to answer Jimmy Touchdown, your question first. How much is each column weighted? National average is simply just like the raw game-by-game stats for every team, every game, just averaged. It's not a median. Yep. Damon Forbes, points per 100 yards is not a bad idea in NFL if you don't have access to drive level data or play-by-play data, which most people do not because it's very hard to come by. So that's a good way to approximate it. How long does it take to update this a day? Well, not counting the scraping part, like a daily scrape run might take 10 seconds. And then once you have that, I actually timed a start to finish crunch yesterday for the entire 2019-2020 season. Start to finish, 2 minutes, 38 seconds. And everything's pretty much automated to get the adjusted individual and team stats. All that's automated. The Monte Carlo, I don't know how long that would take. It really depends on how many simulations I'd want to run. But, like I said, I don't know yet. Use assignment method stats players on the floor. Yeah, that's actually something I wonder if I still have it in there. Did I delete it? I think I deleted it, but I actually was doing that. But I got rid of it because it wasn't ready for the video. But it's funny that you mentioned that Hodge. Because I was actually doing it. I came up with a system to determine every possession, which 5 players are on the floor. It would be totally randomized, but in the long run, it would all pretty much equal out to the player's share. But yeah, take the 5 estimated players on the floor, and then use assignment for that. That might not be a bad idea either. But at the same time, you want to know how much impact each player has on each team's individual stats in case they are missing. That's the thing. How much of an impact does Miles Powell have on Seton Hall's overall stats, right? A lot. Obviously, his P-prod is 19.86. His personal offensive efficiency... Let me go up here because these numbers are more accurate for what I'm discussing. His personal offensive efficiency is about 1.4 points per possession, which is very good. One of the highest in the country, by the way. So if Seton Hall's overall team offensive efficiency is, what was it again? Was it a 1.11? So you just do 0.4 divided by 0.4 slash 1.11. That's about 36% of his team's offense. The total sum of the team's P-prod is 85.28. 20 slash 85.28, which equals 23%. So there's a bunch of different ways you can calculate the impact that a player will have on a team's stats. But it's really only the relevant stats that you plug into a Monte Carlo. Like effective field goal percentage is a nice stat, but you're not going to plug that into a Monte Carlo run. There's really no need. Same with offensive efficiency. You're not going to plug that in either. It would really be like shot rate, field goal percentage, 2-point field goal percentage, and then for 3-pointers as well, offensive rebounding percentage, turnover percentage, those stats, So, gosh, like I said, it makes my brain hurt, and that's why I need to go back upstairs and keep working this out. Usage off the floor. Usage percentage off the floor. Yeah. That would be another. But the thing with usage, though, is the way I calculate it is that it's usage when they're in the game and not overall team usage. Like a player like Chris Arcidiacono for Villanova played in only 8 games last year. But when he was in the game, I'm guessing in mop-up time, his usage was 22.9%. So obviously his... but however, that's only in possessions he was in the game. If you were to extrapolate total usage, like every team's possessions for the entire season and what percentage it was of that, it'd be a little bit different. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go. What about a stat that shows how many points scored against a player while he plays? There's no way to know who is in the game. Like at least in the NBA, I think at least that shows up in the it doesn't show up in the plus minus stat, but the play-by-play data should show who is in and out of a game for the NBA. It's not going to happen in college, but yeah, the play-by-play data or just reading a box score, you're not going to be able to get that figure, who's in the game and when. You just can't. So you have to. Defensive rating tries to guesstimate it, but it's not going to give you exactly what you're looking for. These are current year stats. So this is everything I showed you is 2019, 2020, so last year. Not enough games have been played, so I want to run everything off a full season's worth of data. Positional matchup vector with fantasy points versus position. Defensive points versus guard, defense versus defense, defense versus center. I don't know. There's just no way to. You can't get that kind of data in college basketball. Chillman R. I was thinking about doing something like that, doing like a live betting, live broadcast, and actually using my model to like spit out live bets and everything. I really have. I hope to get it to that point. I still have a long way to go, but that's something I do kind of have in mind. Yeah, I get excited about these stats. Like, I tried to... I don't know if I have it. Do I? I don't, but I actually ran like a KenPom-style website for a few years back in the day. And I had a lot of fun doing it. For me, it's a lot of fun to do. That's why I include stats that won't be included in a Monte Carlo run, like effective field goal percentage, because I'm a stat nerd, first and foremost, so that's why I have it in there. But there's a lot of different ways you can go. But, yeah, I just have... I really want this college basketball model to be awesome. I plan on using it for DFS. I do, but I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way to do a Monte Carlo run. maybe I can do both a team-based and individual-based approach, you know, a team-based with assignment and then individual-based overall. But like I said, it's just hard to factor in defense with the team-based approach. I guess you could sum up the defensive ratings of the players in the game and see how that compares to the team total defensive rating. Like calculate a team defensive rating and a team offensive rating, which I didn't do, and then sum up the average offensive and defensive ratings of the 5 players you have assigned as on the floor, and then adjust the offensive and defensive stats upward or downward based on those. I don't know. Just an idea. I'm spitballing here. Yeah. So anyway, it's been an hour. I need to go back upstairs and keep working. So I'm gonna end the stream here. But yeah, I hope I didn't confuse the hell out of you guys. Like I said, it's incomplete. It's not a complete product. Maybe one day when it's complete, I can go over it in more detail. But I was definitely brainstorming a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now and get back to work. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And also, this video is not just for those of you who watch live, but for anyone who watches days, weeks, months after I broadcast this video. These concepts can be applied to not just college basketball, but NBA as well. Yeah, Hodge, I agree. That's the thing. Like, there's 354 teams in college basketball, though. Like, or 357. However many there are, I don't know, but it's just probably very hard to stay on top of like every team's rosters and injury statuses. So maybe only the big players. And even in DFS college basketball, they're not going to have every game in there. So maybe just like the injury reports on DFS games. I don't know. Anyway, guys, thanks everybody. I'm going to go back